Hi, this is Katapult from Katapult Gaming, and in this video we're going to try to answer the question, is Diablo 2 Immortal Pay-to-Win? So right now I have the shop open, and there is definitely a way to purchase currency with real world money, and they've also added the other weird part where you can convert that to platinum to buy other things to make it even harder for you to remember how much you spent. But before we go too deep in here, kind of want to look at, what is exactly pay to win and what are different ways that games are monetizing their games. So we can see over here, there's different ways you can purchase the game, and there's different ways you can pay while playing the game. And different games use a variety of these tools in order to make a profit. So purchasing the game, it can be free to play like this, or free to download at least, like this game is. You can have a one-time purchase like we've been used to with the other Diablo series and quite a lot of other video games. You can have monthly fees like many MMOs have been using for many years, from Final Fantasy XIV, WoW, and a variety of other ones. You can have season passes, which tends to happen more in first-person shooter games, but I've seen those used in a few MMOs also. Then you have expansion packs, which the Diablo series usually releases. And you have the Game Pass type of service. So, I'm thinking here of the Xbox Game Pass for PC and things like that, where you pay a certain amount of money per month or per year, and you get access to a large quantity of games. And, some producers have also done those. So you can buy the Battlefield games, for example, by purchasing a yearly or monthly or 6-month type of service to pay for it. And then while you play the game, it starts off, you have cosmetics that you can buy that have absolutely no effect on the game. Then you have the quality of life bonuses. So this would be like if you have a stash and you want to increase your storage or your inventory space, that kind of thing. Free teleports if you're a paid player. There's a variety of quality of life things that just makes it easier to play the game if you pay. Progression bonuses. Some games will give you double XP if you're a paid player. Different things like that. Some will even let you outright purchase the maximum level without even playing the game. Some will let you buy gear directly. Some will let you buy upgrades for that gear. Some will do loot boxes, where it's practically gambling and you have a chance of getting something worthwhile. And, most of the time you get some really low value item that you really didn't need. And the last part is loot box exclusive items. And what I mean by this is, some loot boxes will be things you can acquire normally in the game. But the next step up are items that loot boxes are the absolute only way to obtain them. So let's see how Diablo fares with these parts, right at launch. So first question, does it have cosmetics for sale? And yes, absolutely. And the only thing they do is they change the way your character looks. As far as I can tell, there's no stat bonuses or anything like that to make your character stronger from purchasing these. The next question, does it have quality of life bonuses? And if you go in Services Boon of Plenty, you'll see that you can purchase 6 extra rows of inventory, remote market access, and remote or market trade slots supplemental. So these are, fairly minimal quality of life bonuses, but there are a few that you can purchase. In terms of progression bonuses, the only one I was able to find is through the Empowered Battle Pass. you do gain 10 ranks of Battle Pass when you apply it. And when you look over here in your Battle Pass, you'll see that you gain quite a good chunk of XP every time you go up in Battle Pass levels. So that means that, yes, you can effectively purchase some XP with it. It's more of a one-time kind of thing, so it's kind of limited and doesn't necessarily make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. But there is some bonus available there. In terms of gear, it's very minimal what you can purchase as opposed to what you can upgrade using these. So you can't buy, weapons, armors, or anything like that. So I'd say you can't really buy gear too much directly. And same thing with there's no loot boxes or loot box exclusive items per se. What there is, however, is a lot of upgrade items. So if you take these legendary crests here, basically when you do your elder rifts, it lets you get some bonus drops and some, especially in terms of gems. And so, this makes a huge difference. And this is where, you can see players that are for sure going to spend tens of thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars just to get a ton load of these so they can use them to upgrade their existing legendary gems. So you can get legendary gems as you progress, but they're generally going to be fairly low level. But with this, you can actually increase them quite a lot. And if we look at the rest, there's nothing too much available here. You do have a couple of specials and things like that. So if you look at this one here, you get some gem fragments, again, used to upgrade stuff. You do get 2 legendary gems here and some legendary crests. So, for the most part, that part is fairly reasonable. And you do once a day get a free daily reward. So kind of makes you feel that even as a free player, you do get a little something for free from the game. But it's basically, the game is designed with that as part of the economy. So with all of that said, if we go back to PowerPoint and we look at where does Diablo Immortal stack in here, so definitely free download, cosmetics, quality of life, progression bonuses, and upgrades are all here. Now, the danger with this is a very slippery slope. And for that, I'm going to use Lineage 2 as an example. So Lineage 2 is a game that I was playing since open beta back in 2004. And then about 7 years later, in November 2011, they became free to play. And at that point, you no longer had to pay to purchase the game, and you no longer had to pay a monthly fee in order to play the game. At first, they promised that this would be a cosmetics only move, and that in the store you would only ever have cosmetics for the game. That lasted for a couple of months until finally they started moving on to the next step. But at that point, I'd say the game was completely free to win, meaning that free players and players that play with real life money, they were equal in terms of performance. Now, the next step is they started introducing some negligible XP bonuses. And over time, they started introducing a couple of loot boxes. This is where I'd say the game became more pay to win, where free players, you could still do all of the PvE content, you could reach endgame, do raids, all that kind of stuff. However, pay-to-win players, they could definitely do those a little bit easier. But where the large advantage was in PvP, where that's where it really showed that somebody that spent thousands of dollars could just plow through a whole army of free-to-play players. As that progressed, this is where, a lot of people would say if you go down the ethical scale as you go here, where we can see that NC West, I would argue, became much greedier over time, and they started doing all sorts of austerity measures to make the gear more geared towards pay-to-win players. And so one of the steps they took is a reduction of in-game drops and in-game currency. So the in-game currency in that game, Adena, became very much lowered, and in-game drops had always been fairly low, but they even reduced them further. And throughout the years, we've seen that get reduced, patch after patch after patch. It's harder to get items and Adena in the game. And then they started introducing items that are only available in loot boxes, and that made an even bigger difference. And because, the austerity measures were really extreme, it basically made the game pay to play, meaning that free players, you could do a little bit of content, but a lot of the endgame content was completely off limits. And I'd say the last couple of years, they've moved beyond that, and now it's basically cry to play. And what I mean by that is, at this point, if somebody spent $1,000 to a couple of $1,000, they could feel, fairly comfortable in the game. They could not compete against the whales in PvP, but at least in PvE content, they could easily complete everything. But when the game became what I call cry to play, is where every last couple of patches, they've increased the difficulty of the game, meaning that the same monster that you killed 10 years ago is now quite a lot harder. It gives less experience, and it gives less money, and it gives no drops most of the time now. So it's making it much harder for anybody to progress. And if you don't spend to get equipment, you're going to very quickly get to a point where the monsters are just too hard for you to kill. And you're going to reach a plateau where, unless you get carried by a group of players who pay, you're just not going to get anywhere in the game. Then they increased the cost of the loot boxes, and they lowered the drops in them also. And at that point, basically, that's the only way to get probably 90-95% of the gear comes from loot boxes. So if you're a free-to-play player, you only have extremely basic gear and not enough to do anything. And if you're a pay-to-win player, you have to keep spending more and more and more over time. That something that used to cost maybe $50 a couple of years ago, now you may end up spending a couple of $100 to get the same item from loot boxes. For the same amount of money, they'll actually give you less loot boxes, and the drops in them are generally going to be a lot worse. And they coupled that with extreme austerity measures in the game. So, over time, they keep deleting items that drop from monsters to a point where, again, the more it goes, the more you have to buy loot boxes in order to even kill, regular content. And if you want to reach endgame content and raids, you're probably looking at anywhere between 5 to 10k minimum just to have a somewhat viable character. If you want to be somebody that gets invited on their merits, meaning that you're not getting carried through the raids, you're probably looking more between the 10K, 50K, maybe 100K. And if you want to be competing in PvP, you're probably looking at multiple hundreds of thousands and up to maybe 1 million or more at this point to catch up with some of the whales. And they've also made all these loot boxes as time limited, basically. So you have a special event, which is basically a store promotion that for the next 2 weeks you can purchase loot boxes that give these items. And it might be 6 to 12 months down the road before they come back. So even if somebody were to start today and say, I want to start whaling, and, I'll, if somebody's willing to spend a couple of millions to catch up, it'll take them almost a year just to get all the promos that they need in order to catch up. So everything is made that, if you didn't get those items early on, you're kind of stuck way behind the curve, and it's extremely expensive to catch up. So where does Diablo Immortal stand at launch? So they definitely have cosmetic items for purchase. I think most people would agree that's not too much of an issue. And they have negligible XP bonuses, as we talked about. In terms of pay to win, there is a reduction of in-game drops, I would say, because gems, while you can obtain some gems in the game, it's really meant to be a pay-to-win kind of thing, where if you want a lot of decent gems, you're going to have to get your credit card out, and there's just no other way around it. Now, if the game remains at that point, so my experience so far, getting to level 49 so far, is I have had no urge to spend any money in the game. Basically, as a free-to-play player, you can do content, you can level up, you get a ton of gear, as you always do in any Diablo game. I've had probably 7 or 8 different unique drops so far, just to give an example. So really not an issue to progress in the game in its current state. Now, the danger is, what is their plan going forward? And that's why I think there's a very strong reaction right now from the player bases, is that, what happens if they start introducing loot boxes to get your gear? What happens if they make the game harder and they reduce the drops and they make it so that, the only way to keep obtaining gear is through those loot boxes? And it's a slippery slope that we've seen a lot of games fall for. And it's made the game, completely unplayable for 90-95% of the players. If we take in the case of Lineage 2, that's what happened, and you ended up seeing that other than whales, there's not too many free players remaining because they just can't afford to play. And, it'd be a shame. This is a great game. We can see the developers spent a lot of work to make this the best game that they could. And I think it's something that players could have a lot of fun with for years to come. However, if they fall into this slippery slope, and especially the loot boxes is where, the biggest danger is, because that encourages you to spend thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've seen in a mobile Lineage game in Korea, one player spent, I think it's somewhere like $10 million worth in one single event. So, we can see how lucrative these types of tactics can be for gaming companies. However, it generally makes their games unplayable for the vast majority of people. So if their unique goal is to make money, then, this is a way that has been proven to work. However, if part of their goal is to make fun games that people enjoy playing, then I think it's dangerous if they progress further than where they're currently at. But so far, I'm not seeing any major issues where the game is. So, is there some pay to win elements to it? Yes, a little bit. Would PvP be fair between a whale and a free to play player? Probably not. But right now, a free to play player can at least complete all of the PvE elements of the game, and they can have fun, they can do rifts and all that. Again, for challenge rifts, if you're trying to hit the leaderboard, we can all predict that it's going to be mostly whales that make it at the top. But, other than that, you can still have fun and do them and actually complete a lot of the content in the game. So, right now, not too worried, but we'll keep an eye out to see and make sure that they don't progress down this path. Because if they do, there's a couple of very clear signs that shows that they're starting to boil the frog, and that it's time for the frogs to get out. And by frogs, of course, I mean the free-to-play players. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the box below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thank you for watching the video. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.